When traveling, some people like to go places that are touristy. Others prefer places that are off the beaten path and untouched by tourism. I'm Teacher Mike, and today we're learning some intermediate English vocabulary for talking about traveling. And we're going to start with the word itinerary. An itinerary is basically a plan or schedule for a trip, especially one that they give you when you are on a tour or traveling with a travel company. They usually include information about where you'll go, when you'll go there, and what you'll do there. For example, the itinerary says we're having pizza for lunch. Our itinerary includes a lot of sightseeing. Or, what's on the itinerary for today? Next we have all-inclusive. All-inclusive means that you don't need to pay for things like food, entrance fees, or transportation because they have already been included in the price of the room, trip, cruise, or tour. For example, booking an all-inclusive trip reduces the amount of planning that you have to do. Or, unfortunately, drinks are not included in the all-inclusive price. Now, let's talk about some types of destinations that you might have on your itinerary. First, we have landmarks. Landmarks are basically just things that we can see easily and are always in the same place. These can be things like buildings, bridges, mountains, statues, lakes, or rivers. For example, one of the most famous landmarks in the United States is the Statue of Liberty. Or you could ask someone, what landmarks do you recommend visiting? And very famous landmarks might feel touristy. Touristy is an adjective, which generally means that a place is crowded with tourists and very focused on selling things to tourists. For example, although I do recommend visiting Times Square if you go to New York, some people might not like it because it is quite touristy. And some people like touristy places, so whether or not you view this word as negative really kind of depends on whether or not you like touristy places. However, tourist trap, which is a noun, is negative. These are basically places where they only care about making money from tourists, not about giving them a good experience. For example, a local warned us that the seafood restaurant was a tourist trap. Although that cafe is a tourist trap, it does have really good coffee. Or what we thought was going to be a beautiful botanical garden turned out to be an overpriced tourist trap. If you want to avoid tourist traps and go places that feel more authentic, you can say that you want to go where the locals go. Also, if there's a place that's really good but not many people know about, that is what we call a hidden gem. For example, we discovered several hidden gems while walking down the alley behind our hotel. We also have off the beaten path, which basically means that few people go there, especially if this is because it's a bit far away or difficult to get to. For example, some people prefer going to more popular destinations, while others prefer going to ones that are off the beaten path. Or, when you go off the beaten path, you might find some hidden gems. And places that are off the beaten path can also tend to be a bit more rustic. Rustic is an adjective, which basically means simple or old-fashioned, but generally in a good or charming way. For example, we stayed at a rustic bed and breakfast in the countryside. Or, although they're simple, rustic places often feel very cozy. Rustic locations are also great places to unplug, which means to take a break from things like work, phones, and internet. For example, we went to the countryside to unplug for the weekend. And if you're someone who enjoys rustic locations, you might also enjoy roughing it. Roughing it is when you live or travel without modern conveniences such as private bathrooms, beds, or electricity. For example, Natasha isn't coming on the camping trip because she's not a fan of roughing it. In fact, she prefers the exact opposite. She prefers to be pampered. To pamper someone basically means that you give them lots of attention and take really good care of them, and it usually sounds luxurious or relaxing. For example, she spent the whole day being pampered at the spa. Or grandparents often like to pamper their grandchildren. Next, we have overpack and travel light. To overpack means that you pack more stuff than you really need. For example, because he likes to be prepared for all types of situations, he tends to overpack. Travel light means that you travel with very little stuff. For example, I prefer to travel light so that I don't have to worry about checking my bags at the airport. Traveling light also gives you more room in your bags for things that you might buy while traveling. For example, souvenirs. These are things that we buy while traveling to help us remember the places that we have visited. And although souvenirs can be large and expensive, often they are just trinkets. Trinkets are basically small, inexpensive things like magnets, keychains, bottle openers, etc. And finally, we have overrated and underrated. When we say that something is overrated, this basically means that people always talk about how good it is, but you think that it's actually not that good. And this doesn't mean that you think it's bad. It just means that in your opinion, it's not as good as everyone else says it is. For example, maybe there's a restaurant that tourists always go to when they visit your city because people always talk about how good it is. But you think that there are other restaurants that are equally good or better for the exact same price or maybe even for less. If someone asks you what you think about that restaurant, you could say that it's okay, but you think it's overrated. When we say that something is underrated, this basically means that you think it's better than everyone else says it is. So maybe there's a restaurant that you think is really good, but other people don't appreciate so much. In that case, you could say that you think that restaurant is underrated. And although both of my examples were about restaurants, you can use overrated and underrated to talk about absolutely anything that you want. So, what's something, someone, or somewhere that you think is overrated or underrated? Leave a comment and let me know. Also, if you'd like to learn lots of vocabulary for talking about traveling by airplane, make sure to watch this video right here. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.